You've set limits before. You told yourself, I'm not going to chase anymore. I'm not going to beg for attention. I'm not going to put up with this. And then you did. Not because you're weak. Because limits don't hold. Standards do. And most men have never understood the difference. What I'm about to show you isn't advice. It's the pattern you've been living without seeing it. If you've done the work, read the books, gone to the gym, cleaned up your life, and she still treats you like an option, this isn't a tips video. This is the reason why. Most men think setting limits is the same as having standards. It isn't. Here's what no one is telling you. A limit is reactive. It's drawn in the moment when you've already been pushed. It's a response to pain. A standard is different. It's not drawn in the moment. It's already in place before you ever walk into the room. Here's where this gets dangerous. A limit says, I don't operate below this level. One is a ceiling you put on someone else. The other is a floor you put under yourself. And she can feel which one you're working with before you say a single word. Point 1. Limits are negotiated. Standards are non-negotiable. Here's what a limit sounds like in real life. She cancels plans last minute. You tell yourself, I'm not going to let this slide anymore. She apologizes, sends a sweet text, plans something nice, and you let it slide. Not because you're weak, because your limit was always up for negotiation, and she could feel it. Here's what a standard sounds like. She cancels, and without anger, without drama, without an explanation, you simply don't reschedule until she shows you it matters. Not because you're punishing her, because you don't operate in a space where your time doesn't count. That's not cruelty, that's character. But this is only the first layer. The second one cuts deeper. Point 2, limits come from fear. Standards come from identity. Ask yourself this honestly. When you set a limit with a woman, what were you actually trying to protect? Because if the honest answer is, I didn't want her to leave, I didn't want to lose what we had. That's not a standard, that's a strategy, and strategies collapse under pressure. Because they were never about who you are, they were about what you were afraid of losing. A man with standards isn't trying to protect the relationship, he's protecting himself. Not out of selfishness, out of self-respect. And here's the part nobody warns you about. When a man's standards come from who he is, not what he's afraid to lose, she doesn't experience it as rejection. She experiences it as gravity. And gravity is the most attractive force in human nature. Point 3. Limits need to be enforced. Standards simply exist. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. You're on a date. She makes a passive comment that's a little disrespectful. Nothing major, just a test. The man with a limit tenses up. He either says something defensive, or he swallows it and resents it later. The man with a standard does something different. He doesn't react. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't explain himself into the ground. He simply becomes slightly less available. His energy pulls back, calm, not cold. And she feels it immediately, because standards don't need announcements. This is exactly why it keeps backfiring for most men. They announce the limit because they need her to acknowledge it. But the moment you need her to validate your boundary, you've already handed her control of it. And now here's the part that changes everything. Point 4. Standards are set before she arrives. Here's the reversal nobody prepares you for. A high-value man's standards have nothing to do with any particular woman. He didn't build them in response to being hurt. He didn't build them to attract someone. He built them because he decided, long before she showed up, what kind of man he is, and what kind of life he's building. She arrives into a life that is already structured, already purposeful, already full. And the question was never, will she accept my limits? The question was, does she rise to meet the standard of what I'm building? That is the shift. Most men are waiting for someone to be worth having standards for. The grounded man has standards because of who he is, and he'll carry them whether anyone shows up or not. She doesn't give him his standards, she either meets them or she doesn't. And he is equally at peace with both outcomes. That is not a tactic. That is the walk-away standard in its truest form. Most men think she's testing their limits. She's not. She's testing whether there's a man underneath them. Limits collapse under pressure. Standards reveal the man who set them. And once you understand that, you stop enforcing and start simply being. Stop trying to protect yourself from her. The man who is constantly defending his limits is a man who is still operating in reaction mode. He's building walls, the grounded man is building a life. Walls keep things out. A life worth living draws the right things in. When she pulls back, you return to your mission. When she tests your character, you don't explain yourself. You simply remain exactly who you decided to be. That kind of man doesn't need to be constantly enforcing anything, because who he is enforces itself. Your standards are not a shield. They are the architecture of your character, and a woman doesn't fall in love with a man who holds his ground. She falls in love with a man who never had to fight for it because he was always already standing on it. Most men will watch this and go right back to setting limits, telling themselves they've changed, waiting for someone to test them before they figure out who they are. But not you. If you're done reacting and ready to build from the inside out, drop a comment right now. I have standards. Let the community see who is actually doing the work. Subscribe if you're serious about becoming the man you were built to be. And if you know a brother still stuck in the limit cycle, send him this. Right now, not tomorrow. Stay grounded. Keep building. I'll see you in the next one.